Satnam and welcome. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to another in our program, and this particular program is a sub-program that we call Learn-a-Shabad, as you can see at the title on the screen. And this is I think our fourth installment in this program. And today we're going to be focusing on the Shabad Ramdas Sarovar Natay. So if you are new to learning a Shabad, you may want to have a pen and paper handy to write down some things. But you can also go to afterwards you can go to our YouTube channel, Sikh Dharma International, or to the Facebook page for Sikh Dharma International, and under the videos section, you'll find this particular program that you can then rewatch. And even if you're, wanting to catch something in the video, you can stop it and rewind and go over something a few times if you need to really focus on something that you want to learn. So I hope some of you there who are in the program today are really wanting to learn this Shabad. It's a very wonderful, meaningful Shabad, and it's often played in the Harmandir Sahib in Amritsar, the Golden Temple, because it talks about, or it makes reference to, bathing in the tank of Ramdas. And so, we are reminded about how wonderful that is, and especially when you are there at Harmandir, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to connect to the words. These words were written by Guru Arjan, who was the fifth Guru. He was the Guru right after Guru Ramdas, and he was the second son of Guru Ramdas. And I think it's wonderful to look at the meaning of these words. We'll go through that line by line, and then we will also go through the pronunciation of the words. If you are unfamiliar with Gurbani, with Gurmukhi, I'm going to share with you a Shabad sheet, that has the words both in Gurmukhi and in Roman transliteration. And I'm going to do that right now in the chat. So I have just shared that link. If you want to go to that page and get the words for the Shabad, you can refer to that. Also, on that link that I just posted in the comments is a sheet that shows the Saregama Notation. So the notation is a system used in Indian music. Sorry about that. It's used in Indian music as a way to capture the notes. For those of you new to that, just to let you know that in the Indian system, there is no absolute tuning. In other words, they don't use the notes like we do in the West. We have a system where we have a particular note that has, if you look at an oscilloscope, it has a certain number of vibrations, frequency. So, for instance, we all agree that the note A has 440 vibrations per second. And then each of the other notes is built upon mathematical relationships to that. But in Indian system, it's about relative intervals of notes and not fixed frequency of notes. So in their notation system, they use the names of the notes in a scale. So a typical scale, 7-note scale, Saregama Pada Ni Sa. And and so we note in the sheet that I'll show you in a few minutes. We note we write down the name of the note in that system, similar to a system that you may be more familiar with in the West, do, re, mi. So it's using a similar approach. And so anyway, that piece of paper or that sheet can be printed out or just viewed on your computer, and it may help you if you're trying to learn the particular melody that I'm going to show you today. And I want you to remember that there are many melodies that are possible to be used with any Shabad. Mostly we can approach this with a kind of real sensitivity to using a melody that in some way expresses the feeling of the words. But the gurus themselves, when Guru Arjan organized the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, he collected Shabads together in groups based on the rag, which is a musical form that was used for those at that time. And you can see that as a suggestion. Some people see that as a definitive, that's how it should be played. But even with that, the rag does not necessarily dictate what melody you use. So within one rag, you can have many, many different melodies. And there are some musicians, some ragis, who play tunes or melodies that go back to the time of the gurus. They were passed along generation to generation. But then there are also many musicians who play newer melodies that they either compose themselves or learn from somebody else. So there's different approaches. The melody that we're going to learn, excuse me, the melody that we're going to learn today is basically a melody that was recorded almost 50 years ago. Sorry, actually almost 60 years ago, I think, by a very famous ragi from India, by Gopal Singh. And so you'll see that melody in a few moments. What I want to do now is bring up the words so we can look at the meaning. And rather than do that, I'm going to all right, so now we're able to see the first few lines of this Shabad. And right away, the first line, Ramdas Sarovar Natay, says, bathing in the nectar tank of Ramdas. So of course that would seem to directly point to the tank of water that surrounds the Harimandir Sahib. And certainly we can take it that way. But we are also, I think, encouraged to see this as a metaphor, in that the amrit, the nectar within that tank, can also be Gurbani, or the experience of Nam, the connection to the divine through the word, through the Shabad, through the Gurbani, in a way that we, within ourselves, immerse ourselves into that experience of Gurbani, of the Amrit. And that is done by reciting, by connecting to these words in meditation. And so that's also what this line is pointing to, that we should not feel cheated because we've not been able to get to visit the Harimandir Sahib and take an actual dip in the nectar tank around the Harimandir, but rather we should realize that the blessing of Nam of Gurbani is also that experience that we can dip ourselves into, we can immerse ourselves into. So I'll come back to pronouncing each of these words in a minute. I just want to go through the meaning. And also, thank you those of you who are putting your name in the chat. If you haven't done that, that would be great, and where you're logged in from, so I can see and everybody else can see who's here. And that's great. If you have questions along the way, you can go ahead and post them. I may not notice them till a little later in the program. If you have comments, the same thing goes. So great to see some new people and some regulars, so welcome. So the second line, Sab uttere pap kamavte. And this line refers to our indiscretions. Some people use the word sins. In the West, I find that word is too loaded, has too many negative connotations. But certainly the idea that our indiscretions are washed off. And again, this is not literal that if we get into the tank of water around the Harimandar, we should bring a scrub brush to scrub all the indiscretions that we have done in our life. That's not literally how it works. But it is a state of grace that as you enter into that immersion, into the divine experience, then that process erodes or rinses away the feelings we have of we could have done better, we should have chosen differently, you know, that kind of regret. So the next line, Nirmal hoye kare ishnana, one becomes immaculately pure, nirmal, taking this immersion, this ishnan, kare ishnana. So as we bathe, then our soul becomes more free to be enlightened, to be uplifted. And then the next line, Gurupure Kine Dana, the perfect Guru, Gurupure, has bestowed this gift. And that's the grace that I mentioned earlier, you know, that as you dip your toe into the experience of this immersion, of this Ishnan, that you realize that it's all a gift. Next line, Sabakusala came prabodhare. And this says, God, the divine, the infinite, has blessed all with peace and pleasure. And so, you know, just a reminder that as we go through this process, these experiences of peace and comfort, perhaps, are available to anyone. Let me just scroll down here. Sorry, a few steps I have to take to make that happen. Okay, so the next line, Sai Salamat Sabatoku Bare, Guru Ka Shabad Vichare. And here the Guru Arjan is saying, everything is safe and sound as we contemplate the word of the Guru's Shabad. And if you see at the end of that line the word Rahau, which can kind of literally mean pause, but it really means pause and reflect. It's a kind of way of bringing special attention to the line, like underlining it, giving it more importance in terms of the message of this Shabad. And so as we look at the meaning of these lines, this line we should spend a little more time on trying to understand. Everything is safe and sound as we contemplate the word of the Guru's Shabad. And, you know, there are certainly people who will take that as a state of grace, as a gift from the divine. But I think there's also a recognition that we generate within ourselves that as we practice, then simply by practicing, by repeating the Shabad, by allowing ourselves to be in that experience of the Shabad, of the word, that brings in of itself a feeling of peace and a feeling that things are safe and sound. Okay, and now let's go to the next line. Sad Sang Malalati. In the Sad Sangat, the company of the holy, filth is washed off. And that's continuing with the same message, except that here Guru is saying that, yes, stepping into the experience of Naam or Gurbani, the Shabad, is going to do that, is going to help you feel lighter, is going to let you lay down your burdens and wash off or at least remove the regret, the guilt that you might feel. This also is available simply by being around and with people who are like-minded, the Sangat, the Sad Sangat, those who also are attempting to be in that state of consciousness at the same time. And that's where, you know, when we go to the Gurdwara, and of course during COVID right now, many people are not able to do that, but even when you aren't physically able to be connected to other people in that way, doing things like this, you know, an online program is another way that we can feel that we have a kind of online Sad Sangat. And so for those of you who are regulars to my program, I definitely feel that we have generated that kind of energy where we feel comfort in seeing each other again and knowing that we are all together in the moment, sharing these thoughts and these words. And so that's an experience of Sad Sangat, and we can quickly realize how valuable that is. And so Guru goes on to complete that thought by saying, Parabrahma Beo Sati, the Supreme Lord, Parabrahm, meaning the infinite divine, has become our friend and helper. That's a really familiar kind of way of connecting to the divine that has always touched me deeply when I encounter that within lines of Gurbani. I mean, it really talks about how we don't have to feel like the divine is some unapproachable, severe idea that we have to fear the presence of the divine, but rather there is also this understanding that the divine can be with us like a friend, that connecting to that energy of support, of even love is there if we just sit with it and open to it. The next line, Nanak Nam Dhyaya, Dhyaya. Nanak meditates on the Nam, the name of the Lord. So I think I've spoken a few times in previous programs about understanding this reference to Nam. and trying to encourage you not to think of it in a limited sense of meaning just name, the name of God, the name of the divine, if you will. Because it's more than that. It's much more. It's an embodied experience, that is a potential experience that we each can have with Gurbani, where the vibration of these sounds within us, as we say them, opens a door of connection, opens a door to the divine that is very powerful. And so when the line here says Nanakanam Dhyaya, it's really referring to the fact that Nanak was himself a realized being, had connected through Nam, through the Shabad, to the divine, and had that experience and was able to maintain it throughout the time in his life when he was Guru, after having Samadhi, Jala Samadhi. And that the reference here is, of course, this was not written by the person we refer to as Guru Nanak, but each of the gurus, other than Guru Gobind Singh, referred to themselves as Nanak because they believed, and the belief for Sikhs is that each of them manifested the same light as Nanak. And so they often sign their compositions Nanak. And here is what Guru Arjan is doing here too. He's saying, I have connected to this, but also I bow my head in reverence to Guru Nanak, who also connected to this Nam. And then the Shabad finishes with the line, Adipurak Prabhupaya. He has found God, the primal being. Adipurak. And, this is just a reference to encourage all of us through this practice to remember that that's the goal, that's the destination where we are trying to connect to and live in that same consciousness as Guru Nanak and all the gurus. So let me go back now to the transliteration so that you can get a better understanding. Let's see here. No, that's not what. How about that? Okay. And let me again scroll up to the top. Okay. So let's just go through this pronunciation, and then we'll start working on the melody. Okay, so the first line, Ramdas Sarovar Natay. Now you say it. Ramdas Sarovar Natay. And let's do it again. Ramdas Sarovar Natay. Ramdas Sarovar Natay. Very good. The next line. Sab Uttare Pap Kamate. Sab Uttare Pap Kamate. And again. Sab Uttare Pap Kamate. Sab Uttare Pap Kamate. Next line. Nirmal Hoye Kar Ishanana. Nirmal Hoye kara ishnana. And again, nirmala hoye kara ishnana. Nirmal hoye kara ishnana. Good. And the next line, Gurupure, let me change that. Gurupure, because these, if you can see there in the Gurmukhi, pure is different than pure. So we want to try to be distinct there, even though the transliteration, the transliteration with the AI would seem to indicate we pronounce it A, but it's A, as if there was two separate letters there, the A and the I, A. So Gurupure Kini Dana. Now you go. Gurupure Kini Dana. Well, I messed up again. It's too far away for me to read the Gurmukhi too well. So let me do it again. Gurupure Kine Dana. There we go. So it's Kine, and there the A is a almost AY kind of sound for English speakers. So Gurupure Kine, sorry. Gurupure Kine Dana. Now you. Gurupure Kine Dana. Good. Next line. Sabakusul came prabhadare. Sabakusul came prabhadare. And again, Sabakusul came prabhadare. Sabakusul came prabhadare. Next line. Sai salamat sabatok. Let's just do that part. Sai salamat sabatok. Sai salamat sabatok. And last time. Sahi salamat sabatok. And then the next part of the line. Uttare Guruka Shabad Vichare. Uttare Guruka Shabad Vichare. And again, Uttare Gurute, Uttare Guruka Shabad Vichare. Uttare Guruka Shabad Vichare. Good. And let me scroll it up again. And then the next line, Sadasang Mal Lati. Sadasang Mal Lati. And again, Sadasang Malalati. Sadasang Malalati. And the next line, Parabram Bheo Sati. Parabram Bheo Sati. And again, Parabram Bheo Sati. Parabram Bheo Sati. And the next line, Nanak Nam Dhyaya. Nanak Nam Dhyaya. And again, Nanak Nam Dhyaya. Nanak Nam Dhyaya. Adipurak Prabhapaya. Adipurak Prabhapaya. And again, Adipurak Prabhapaya. Adipurak Prabhapaya. Okay, so we've gone through all the words. And now, let me, I think if I do this, there. Okay. So now we can get to the melody. And the melody is always a bit tricky because, well, one aspect about choosing the melody is where to start the melody. Because a lot of people find that their voice is either struggling with a melody being too high or too low. And so in some ways, that's where the system of the Indian music notation is very easy, because once you know where your vocal range is, then you can keep going back to the same place to set the sa, which is usually the first note in the melody. And that will help you so that you know where you can play a melody. Today, I'm going to show you two places. The first is where I would play the melody based on my voice. So it starts here. So if you have a harmonium, you can find that. It's C sharp if you're familiar with Western notation. And so a typical scale in C sharp would be sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa. Right? So we're going to set the melody here. But the second melody, I mean not the second melody, but the second way to play it, we're going to set it lower. And that's especially for women, I find, because generally speaking, when men and women sing together, even though they feel like in the moment they're singing the same note, it's actually the case that the women are singing an octave above the men, generally. Now that works pretty well, except if the men have a higher range to their voice, it makes some women strain their voice to get up to that if they stay above. And so sometimes they'll jump back down to a lower octave as the male voices go higher. So you may find in this first melody, if you are a woman with a normal vocal range, you may find that the upper portion of the melody strains your voice a little. And so don't worry about it. I'll show you another melody, the same melody, but set it lower. So if you have had a chance to look at the Saregama, that will help you. But if not, lots of us just learn by visual, by looking at the notes, or by hearing it, by just learning the melody first. And as I said, this is a recording based on a recording that's very easy to find on the internet by Gopal Singh, G-O-P-A-L. And anyway, so let me play it for a few minutes so you can get used to it, and then I'll break down the melody a little more carefully for you. Ramdas Sarovar Natay Samutre Pakamate Ramdas Sarovar Natay Samutre Pakamate. Nirmal kar ishnana gurpure kine dana. Nirmal kar ishnana gurpure kine dana. Ramdas Sarovar Natay Samutre Pakamate Samutre Pakamate. Samba kusala kema prabdare, sai salamat samato kumare. Samba kusala kema prabdare, sai salamat samato kumare. Ramdas Sarovar Natay, Samutare Pakamate. So rather than go through all the lines, I think that that gives you an overview of how the melody works. And, and that will allow you to go line by line yourself. With, so the next line, I just remembered this, there's a little change to the melody that I had forgotten about. So let me just go through that for a moment with you. Sab kusal kema prabdare, sai salamat samto kumbare. Gur gur ka shabd vichare, gur ka shabd vichare. So let me show that to you again. Gur ka shabd vichare, gur ka shabd vichare. So again in rhythm that goes. Samba kusal kema prabdare, sai salamat samto kumbare. Gur ka shabd vichare, gur ka shabd vichare, gur ka shabd vichare, gur ka shabd vichare. Ramdas Sarovar Natay, sab utare pakamate. Sorry, I missed that little bit earlier when I was thinking about this show. But there's a couple of other things I want to bring to your attention on the rhythm and the starting of each of the verse lines. So, you know, what you saw me do there was Nirmala hoy. So if you count the rhythm is in 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nirmala hoy kar ishnana. So that line, there's a 2-beat pickup before the downbeat. Nirmala comes in on the downbeat, the 1. And that's true also of the next line. Where are we? Samba kusal kema prabdare. So again, that sabba is coming in on the 7/8 beat of the measure before, if that helps you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sabba kusala came. And that's fine, but the fourth and fifth lines come in a little differently. So the fourth line is Sada Sangamalalati, Sada Sangamalalati. And for that, you have to come in on the actual downbeat, the first beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Sada Sang. Is that right? Hold on. Sada Sangamala. Oh, it's coming in a beat late. Sorry, one beat later. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Sad. So there's one beat that goes before. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. Sada Sangamalalati Pada Brahma Beo Sati. So that line and the next line do the same thing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1. Nanak Namadiyaya Adpurak Prabhapaya. Nanak Nam. Okay, so that should help you to clarify how the phrasing on these lines is a little different. And that's not that uncommon. And it sometimes can be really challenging for people who are new to this and not sure of themselves about whether they should be doing something always on the one beat. And that isn't always the case. Sometimes it comes in early, sometimes it's a beat late. You know, these things are structured differently based on the way the Gurmukhi, the Gurbani, has to be phrased within the rhythm. So you have to be aware of that. So I want to also show you that there's some variations that you can do within this melody structure to sort of stretch it out, give it a little more focus on different parts. So the main line, of course, is Ramdas Sarovar Natay, but you can also take the second half of that line and use it like a verse. So, Ramdas Sarovar Natay Sabutane Pap Kamate Sabutane Pap Kamate Sabutane Pap Kamate Sabutane Pap Kamate Samutane Papakamate Ramdas. Now I want to show you the other position to play this in, which is down here. And for many women, this may be a better place to start this melody. It's a little low for me, but Ramdas Sarovar Natay Sabutane Pap Kamate Ramdas Sarovar Natay Sabutane Pap Kamate Sabutane Pap Kamate Nirmala hoy kar Ishnana Buddha All right, so that should give two possible places to place this melody on the keyboard and for your vocal range. So you can choose either of those, or you can figure it out to play it somewhere else. You know, these two positions that I've shown you are common because, and this is funny to say it, but it's easier to play the melodies when you start on a black note. And especially, it gives you the flexibility for your thumb and your hand to go up and down more easily. Now, you can certainly play all the melodies in, let's say, C, you know. Ramdas, Ramdas, I don't know if I can. Ramdas, oops, it must go here. Ramdas Sarovar Natay, Samba Uttare Papakamate. But what that may give you in some comfort, because you might be more familiar with playing on the white notes, it makes it a little more complicated with getting your fingers to move. Not that that's something that you may find a challenge, but some people do. And so that's often why a lot of harmonium players start their melody up on here or down here. Just you'll find that that's common. So let's take some questions. Anybody has questions or comments, or if you want to know anything more about the melody, about the pronunciation, about the meaning of any of the words, that would be fine. What else can I tell you about this? So there is that one line that I was showing you that has a kind of third part to it, and I don't want you to get caught up on that. It's just on that one line, and it's a little longer. So if you see in the Shabad, mostly it's like couplets, but that one line has a third part to it. Guru ka shabad vichare, Guru ka shabad vichare. So that's something that you'll just have to fit in. It's a beautiful variation to the melody. And I remember when I first heard that, it was really it stood out because it's nowhere else. You don't use that part of the melody anywhere else, but just there. And it's kind of like a little gem that just comes forward as you play the melody. So that's wonderful. Any questions? I'm seeing lots of people. So Germany, Sita Bhakti, and Rupinder Jaspir Karabanda, great, and Ravi, and Mohan Sangeet, Harnad, and Jagraj. So all of you, you know, if you have any questions, now's the time. Jesse, hi, good to see you again. And yeah. This Shabad has been very comforting to me. It was one of the first Shabads I learned, and it's like a familiar friend. It's although I haven't played it a lot in the last year. I probably should have, but it's one of those very familiar Shabads. So if you're in a gathering with people who are familiar with Shabads, this will be one that they will all sing along with, because many people know the words well enough that if they hear the line once, they're going to sing with you. And that's something that's really wonderful. I think above almost anything else, the experience of leading the kirtan is a very profound experience that is available in Sikh Dharma. And yes, there are other traditions that have kirtan and leading it, but there's just, because of our emphasis on the Gurbani, there's just such a beautiful thing when you are in the Sangat and you sing a line by yourself usually, and then everybody joins in and sings it the second time. You just feel so connected to people, so supported, and so accepted in that moment, both by the energy of the people singing, but also in your connection to the bhakti, the divine experience of the presence within you and within the sound current that you're enjoying in that moment. And I know that if you're a first time or new to playing kirtan or Gurbani, maybe you're a little nervous about doing it in the Sangat, but I will tell you that goes away very quickly, and that the overall experience is very, it's a gift in itself. So if you feel called to do that, I highly encourage you to step into that experience, whether it's online or in a community gathering with Sikhs or just with people who aren't Sikhs perhaps, just as a way to share something. It's a very beautiful experience. And we have Surinder from the UK as well. Christos from Greece, very nice. I'm not seeing any questions. All right, well, let me tell you about next week. I know it's running across the bottom of your screen there. I'll get rid of that and just go here. There we go. So, yeah, next week I'm going to have some wonderful guests, and we're going to talk about understanding the different views that are emerging of the identity of a Sikh. And whether you consider yourself a Sikh or not, it's still an interesting discussion, because I think we'll touch on a lot of themes that are very relevant to anybody who is trying to understand who they are and how they fit into the world right now. And my guests are very interesting in of themselves. One will be a wonderful young woman from the community here, Narinjan Kaur, and she is a doctor, a professor, and she teaches at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. She teaches in the Sikh and Jain studies area there. And another of our guests is a woman from Hofstra University, Cassandra. She's also she's from Italy, but she has studied a lot in India and elsewhere about Nod, and she teaches in the Sikh Studies program there. And we have another young man who is a professor also at Hofstra in the Sikh Studies area. And oops, I'm trying to remember his name because I haven't met him yet, but I've read some of his writing. And it'll come to me as soon as I sign off on this. But anyway, and then the third guest is a young man, sorry, the fourth guest is a young man, Connor Singh, who has a very interesting family history and is a scholar and also an artist. And I think all of us coming together will provide a very lively discussion about identity. And so I hope you'll be able to join us for that. The week after that, I believe we'll be doing a Roots of Sikh Dharma, another episode there. And we're going to be looking, I believe, at what Sikhs believe. And we may not get that all into one program, so it may be part one. And of course, it'll go hand in hand with a future program called What Sikhs Practice. So I wanted to sort of focus that way into what are the beliefs and then what are the practices. So that should be in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to wrap it up here, I think, if there's no more, no questions at all. I very much appreciate you all being here and hope that you can like this program, share it around to friends, people who might find learning a Shabad is something they would like to do. And then hope to look forward to seeing you next week, Wednesday, next week, same time, same space. So I will hope that you will stay safe and stay healthy, and we'll see you next week. Satnam. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.